All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're sketching out the chilling blueprint of a twisted social media experiment from Carl Clare Burke's novel, Yesteryear. We're mapping out a mind-bending story that isn't just about a simple, rustic pioneer farm. No, it's about the terrifying architecture of a massive illusion, and honestly, it serves as a pretty stark warning about exactly how far some people will go to curate the perfect online life. Look at this quote right here. We're immediately hit with this jarring contrast between a supposedly devout pioneer mother and the very human reality of waking up freezing. Natalie, our protagonist, totally prides herself on discipline. She plays the role of the flawless, devout Christian woman, basically a picture-perfect traditional pioneer wife before the modern internet even had a word for it. But right here in this quote, the mask slips. She's waking up in the frigid, deep-as-death-black morning, completely in character for a woman living in what appears to be 1855. But that modern slip of the tongue? Yeah, that sets the stage for sure. We know right away something isn't quite right. So just how deep does this 1855 illusion go? Well, it's meticulous, but it's flawed. Natalie walks outside on a freezing morning and checks the window panes. Her children's names are carved right into the wood. Noah, 1853. Abel, 1854. And then, newly notched, Mama, 1855. But as she steps onto the porch, we get this overwhelming sense of uncanny nostalgia. You see, the $30,000 automatic chicken coop they bought years ago is just gone. It's been replaced by a cheap thatched roof. This pioneer world she's stepping into is entirely staged. They physically renovated their present-day life out of existence, stripping away the modern world just to leave the aesthetic of a simpler time. And it gets so much darker when you see just how isolated they are. They're located 5 miles down a winding gravel road in the Idaho mountains. Zero neighbors. There's absolutely no music, no modern entertainment, just total silence and these endless dark winters. And here is the truly terrifying part. Her younger children genuinely believe this is the only world that exists. When Natalie asks her sick daughter Maeve where they are, trying to grasp for reality, the kid actually replies, "Yesteryear, Mama. That's what we call home." They are completely trapped in a 19th century simulation. And this number brilliantly illustrates exactly why they're trapped. 1 million. The crucial point here is that this isn't the 1800s at all, but rather a massively successful modern social media empire. Natalie and her husband Caleb are running an Instagram account that just hit 1 million followers. A TV host actually smelled the rot of their farm and labeled it a delicacy. They are selling a perfectly fermented vision of traditional America. Millions of people are tuning in every day to watch this manic pixie American dream girl churn butter and raise her huge family off the land, completely unaware of the dark reality sustaining this beautifully filtered facade. But you can't keep the real world out forever, right? This is the exact moment the pioneer facade begins to crack. On a freezing, cloudy December day, strangers arrive. Modern outsiders, including a TV producer named Shannon, walk straight up the driveway. Natalie's mind just overheats. Suddenly, that carefully curated silence is shattered by the deafening, metallic sound of Shannon's camera going clutchink. It's a massive intrusion of the modern world into their closed-loop fantasy. Natalie realizes instantly that letting these producers onto the property is a terrible mistake. The boundaries between her fake 1855 reality and actual present-day scrutiny have violently collided. Now we're looking at a total unraveling, where the physical chaos on the farm is directly feeding the digital chaos off it. On the actual farm, things are falling apart, literally. There is a bloody massacre in the chicken coop, where all but one chicken are killed. Meanwhile, modern nannies have practically taken over the household. Yet online, they are gaining 30,000 followers a week. The tension finally snaps when a national news anchor announces on television that producer Shannon has leveled an assault allegation against Natalie, promising to reveal the dark, behind-the-scenes reality of how Yesteryear Ranch is actually run. The empire is officially crumbling. Just let this haunting quote sink in for a second. This land is not how I remember it. It perfectly emphasizes the deep, tragic irony of this entire experiment. Natalie traded a genuine connection with her land, her home, and her actual children for an online empire. She was so incredibly busy curating the aesthetic of a pioneer lifestyle for millions of strangers that she never actually walked the woods on her own property. She never learned the names of the wildflowers or how to genuinely farm. She built an empire, yeah, but she is an absolute stranger living inside it. As Natalie's psychological breakdown accelerates, we see her wandering totally lost in her own woods. The media empire she intended to build, the magazines, the TV shows, it's all been forgotten, entirely swallowed by the survival of the lie.
But the most devastating realization is how her kids are fading away from her. She admits she can only perfectly picture her oldest daughter. The younger ones aren't even memories anymore. They are, in her words, ancient hieroglyphs painted along the far walls of my mind. They're just charcoal sketches of a life she meant to live, completely sacrificed for the sake of an audience.
Then the story hits a total fever pitch. After wandering lost for hours in the snow, fleeing the unraveling reality of the farm, Natalie's 19th century fantasy comes to a screeching halt. A car engine cuts through the pioneer silence. A modern red Subaru rolls up the bumpy dirt driveway and parks right by the barn. A woman steps out wearing an expensive puffer coat, jeans, and waterproof boots. And the kicker? She is an uncanny, identical version of Natalie. It's her grown-up daughter, Clementine. Judgment Day is here. This chilling realization marks the absolute end of the social media experiment. The arrival of her modern adult daughter literally shatters the time capsule they've been trapped inside. It pivots our explainer completely away from the dark, curated, fake past of Yesteryear Ranch and throws us headfirst into a stark, unforgiving modern reality. The game is over. Which brings us to part 3, the future. The beautiful pioneer illusion is entirely stripped away, and the devastating legal and familial fallout of this enforced traditionalism is finally dragged into the light. 30. That is the shocking reality of Natalie's situation. She is now serving a 30-year prison sentence. She's locked away for 4 counts of aggravated child abuse, along with a bunch of lesser charges. She is completely isolated from the children she forced into her twisted game. The woman who built a million-follower empire based on a manufactured image of perfect motherhood is now sitting in a prison cell, facing the very real consequences of the trauma she inflicted on her own family. Through a prison interview, we learned the sickening truth of how this all actually started. It was originally just a fun little trial of pioneer pretend play to hide from earlier legal troubles involving her husband's family. They literally ripped out the hardwood floors and destroyed the modern parts of their home just to hide from the law. But over time, the hiding became the plan. What started as a summer activity to lay low morphed into a literal, inescapable prison for her children, depriving them of the modern world entirely. Ultimately, though, the narrative is reclaimed by her daughter, Mary, in a best-selling memoir, The Book of Mary. In the prologue, Mary describes her life like a dark fairy tale. Living in a cabin, parents telling stories of wolves to keep her too terrified to ever leave. But then an angel came, her older sister Clementine, who returned to rescue them. The book ends with them driving away, hurtling into the future, and never looking back at yesteryear. They survived, and they took their story back. So, I'll leave you with this final provocative question to chew on. What happens when the dream becomes a prison? Natalie commodified her life so intensely that she completely lost her grip on reality, turning a picturesque Instagram aesthetic into a literal nightmare of child abuse and isolation. It's a terrifying reflection on the extreme dangers of curating our lives for an audience, and it really makes you wonder about the incredibly dark realities that can hide right behind a beautifully filtered online facade. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.